Welcome to this fourth class on the zodiacal constellations featuring the twins and the crab. I'm Kaylin Castell here with Eric Roth, and we are really excited about what we have to share with you today. It's good. It's really, really
Yes.
good. So, we thought we'd start with just a way to bring ourselves more present into the moment as we like to do. And so, if you want to just allow yourself to have a deep belly breath, bring yourself into the moment, ground into this moment. And then from Starlight Elixirs and Cosmic Vibrational Healing, we'll be inspired by these words. You do not have to understand all aspects of something, in this case, the stars and constellations, to work with it. Being aware of it, opening to it, drawing it in, absorbing it where it appears to be of benefit is quite sufficient. Those who simply utilize the essence of meditating on a given star or stars or working with the energies themselves may notice slightly unusual effects, ways they see and feel themselves differently. This then is the real truth. How this emerges for individuals and not just the underlying concepts and ideals. In working with the energies of the stars, people are shown unconsciously what they are capable of working with, going far beyond any simple information about the stars. This stimulates an important aspect in people and our relationship to our starry family. I just thought it was such a great quote to remind us that we don't have to understand all of this with our mind, with our intellectual mind. It helps to have some of that understanding. But probably the best thing is when we just go hang out with the stars and start to get that direct download of information from the stars themselves. So, anything you want to add to that, Eric?
No, it's absolutely true. Now, if you're under the stars, you can really pick it up and like assimilate whatever is coming in. It just leave yourself open to the light, to what is out there, and each person's going to experience it in their own unique fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's worth doing as often as possible.
Yes, it is. And if it's cloudy, you can always just tune in through meditation. You don't have to always see them. It's really great to see them, though. It's that's
Yes, yes.
that's the most inspiring. So we're going to talk about the twins and the crab, and so just so you get an idea, again, we like to just share this with everyone that the sun travels through the twins. This is based on what astronomers say. So again, as we've said, in terms of uh, how they divide up the sky and whatever, but this is what this is what they're saying for now. So from June 22nd to July 20th, from about zero Cancer to about 29 Cancer, the sun is traveling through the twins. And then through the crab from July 21st to August 10th, um, from about zero Leo to about 18 Leo. I mean Leo, not Libra. And so, but the seasonal signs that are also connected with these constellations, the twins being Gemini, it's not Gemini that overlays this constellation, it is Cancer. And it is not Cancer that overlays the crab, it is Leo. So just that reminder once again about that.
And that brings us to the twins. So this is a graphic of from Stellarium, showing and highlighting the twins constellation there closer to the left-hand side of the screen. And I kind of did it that way to show us where the galactic edge is, right in that cross that's coming down, and you can see the boundary of Gemini and Cancer on one side, and then Cancer and Leo on the other side of the twins. But then we've got, on the right side, we've got the bull right there. And it's interesting, that was taken with where Mars is currently here as of late 2022, between the horns of the bull, and Elnath right there, and then Aldebaran off to the bottom right. But the primary stars, of course, of the twins are, some of the most famous stars in the sky, Castor and Pollux, and part of a larger group, which I haven't, we haven't really. Kaylin, did you talk much about the Sacred Hoop? in the last.
Yes, I talked a little bit about it last time,
Yeah.
and yeah, and and how, and we were going to talk a little bit more about it this time too. So go for it.
So yeah, so this I don't have a slide specifically relating to the sacred hoop in this class, but Castor and Pollux represent part of the outer boundary of the sacred hoop, and the twins constellation is like fully in the hoop itself. So it represents part of that hoop. And this is again, the hoop comes from the Lakota tribe of North America, and it's their connection to their from the sky to the land, where they would do an absolutely powerful ceremony over a few months, a Sundance, and then they would also travel around the Black Hills region out here in North America, in set in the Dakotas areas. And this is based on the sun's transiting through this area of the sky, this sacred hoop, which includes the twins. So it's a totally definitely a different um, experience around what I'm going to share here in this class with Castor and Pollux and the twins and all of that. So there's plenty to share with this. So I'm excited to get into this more. So here's the uh, this is a slide that I've been sharing with each of the constellations I've covered. And you can see the constellation of the bulls, primary stars, before the twins. And it covers part of the Taurus sign and the vast majority, if not all, of the twins there. This is an approximate amount. And then the twins covers almost all of Cancer. I know, Kaylin, you ride all the way till 29. So it's not exactly, I don't have it perfectly there, but into the late degrees of the sign of Cancer. And then the orangish lines represent the seasonal points of March equinox and June solstice there. And I've got it from 1 to 25 degrees of Cancer. Again, sometimes we might have different numbers listed there, but that doesn't mean that one is wrong and one is right. What it's looking at is like, what is the boundary? And it's for me, it's more fluid. It's not really something like static, other than like if you're trying to measure when the sign begins, but the constellation itself is a larger pattern of stars. So it's one of like that depends on what we're looking at and what culture is seeing whatever stories might be there. So this is just an easy to reference graphic for everyone that will, of course, will be getting these slides here. So the twins, this is actually, I taught the Cosmology Night Sky event for the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, what was once known as SAMS. And one of the topics that I brought forth just for a few minutes is this twins constellation, which represents duality, or the gates of duality. And this is a very, very ancient constellation, and it's been associated with the sign of Gemini, or quote twins, at least for 3,000 years. At least this is from the Mediterranean, land around the Mediterranean Sea. They typically represented brothers or sisters, but the original one was primarily male and female, where it had that polarity of the masculine and feminine, and the polarity of basically anything that has, polarity, night and day, good and bad, that kind of thing. The twins, they look like in the sky, the Roman numeral 2, which Castor and Pollux are the primary stars, which were deities or demigods, if you will, in ancient times. And they had temples that were dedicated to them. And in ancient Mesopotamia, where modern Iraq, Iran, and the Middle Eastern area, the twins were seen as gatepost holders and depicted as wild-haired figures, representing more of a primal energy of the earth and grasping the cosmic gatepost next to the throne of Enki, who is the precursor to Saturn. I've got another slide specifically about that. And also at times in various parts of Asia and Europe in ancient history, they were depicted as horses or horsemen that rode the steeds that pulled the sun across the sky. So you can see there's a little bit of a graphic there, although on that one, there's an angel below that. Um, there's also various statues of Castor and Pollux through uh, Italy and Sicily, and I think there's one in uh, Greece as well. I think I got some information about that on one of the slides. So duality, this is a really fascinating journey. This could, I mean, almost be a class in and of itself. Um, just the concept of duality and where we're going in human quote evolution or our consciousness is going, or where the sort of the spirit of the soul of humanity is going. So in some mythologies, it was seen as a portal duality and marked the March equinox point from 8,600 years ago to about 6,500 years ago. And it marked the twins themselves marked the June solstice in the year, roughly around the year 200 BC. And I've got some other slides around that for more specific information. And to the present day, which is basically right now, roughly the foot of the twins, just at the edge, and the right around the horns of the bull. So it's transitioning, precessing into the horns of the bull, the June solstice point is. And then the constellation marking the June solstice, this one here of the twins, was directly involved in the building and expansion of duality-based cultures and religions. So over 2,000 years ago, it really got going. It was like duality was already present, but it really got amplified, and you know, the volume got turned up in that the whole philosophical and patriarchal belief in duality. And this is where we are now. This is how that sort of came about. And this is what's interesting is that the June solstice point, which we saw I shared with the graphic with the constellation, that is where souls travel to come into the galaxy, come to Earth, to go into the wombs in the mothers. And so that was considered in various parts of the world the Silver Gate. And so the souls were traveling to the Silver Gate. And in that passage, they would need to go through, especially the last 2,000 years, they would need to go through the gates of duality. So basically, when the twins marked the June solstice, they were coming through those gates of duality. So they had to learn and incarnate into that duality to incarnate here on this planet. So that leads to much larger philosophical and you know, discussion about duality, but this is one that I wanted to bring forth for everyone today. The Great Twins constellation. So this is, again, ancient Mesopotamia, and this is from the really great article by Craig Crossan from the Sky and Telescope magazine of January 2018, where he talks about the ancient Mesopotamian and Babylonian constellations. And this is one I was talking about. So they called it the Great Twins, and there's the spelling of how they pronounced it and or spelled it in Mesopotamia, but it was associated with the patron deity of the southern skies at the time, Enki, who was the you know, the precursor, ancient precursor to Saturn and Kronos. But he was part of Eridu. And this association might harken back to the 4th millennium BC, when Eridu was the cultural center at one time of Mesopotamia. And his patron deity presumably held sway over most of the heavens. So they were gatepost holders, the wild-haired figures, and they were pictured where the god Enki was holding, in fact, there's I don't know if I have it in this one, but there's other pictures where he's holding like a jar and a stream is coming out of it, almost similar to the whole water bear constellation there. So that's really interesting. But he's flanked by two new
There's the jar with water coming out of it, but it's
right, but it's on both sides of the bowl
on
there.
both sides. Yeah.
So it's like I think that has to do with the gates and how the bull is part of that on some level. I'm not sure like the artistic representation of that, what that is, but you can see that in that particular image. And so these were two nude, wild-haired, frontally faced figures grasping buckled gateposts. So they were holding it. It was like they were the kind of a guardian type of figure, but they were also the ones that were just like uh, the helpers to Enki. So, and they were found in cylinder seal designs, and later Mesopotamian texts recommended that the terracotta plaques of these gate holders, which they called talim or twins, be buried in the corners of courtyards as protection against evil influences and demonic intruders. So they were also protective spirits in that way too. So this is coming from the sky down to the earth. And so anyway, this is a different like stream of mythological and spiritual belief and our own connection to some of our ancient history on this planet here. And then we've got the twin horsemen, of course, Castor and Pollux. The twins were known as which are the heads, or essentially those two stars are kind of the heads of the twins. They were called the Ashwins, the horsemen of India and part of Hindu mythology. And they were also at other times called Tamil Midhunam, and they were a boy and girl figure, as well as sometimes two male figures. And in ancient Greece, of course, they were called, and Rome, they were called the Dioscuri, which are Castor and Pollux. And these are some of the statues that are present in various parts of that south eastern part of Europe, with Rome and Greece there. Now, there are other, of course, beliefs and connections to the twins and Castor and Pollux. In the Christian Bible, they also related to Adam and Eve, as well as Cain and Abel was something I also found out too. So over 2,000 years ago, they represented the June solstice. And in the book Star Lore, there's a reference to the Hebrew zodiac and the twins representing the tribe of Benjamin and the mystical union of Christ and his redeemed. So even again, another biblical reference to these, to the zodiac, and just another, like I get sometimes people saying, that Christian that would say astrology is bad or evil, or it's not, why do you practice that? Well, it's literally written in those texts, in those ancient texts from not just the Bible, but other ones throughout the globe. So if they would actually, read the actual Bible, it's right there in there. And then 7,000 years ago, the twins marked the March equinox and symbolized the balance of day and night, especially in relation to the stars of Castor and Pollux, which, to the naked eye, they seem about the same brightness, but one is actually brighter than the other. In ancient Egypt, they were, and I've got a slide for this, Horus the Elder and Horus the Younger, and also related to two sprouting plants. And then Horus was typically shown as a falcon or a human figure with a falcon head, which is obviously, there's a graphic right there on this slide. So you can move on there. Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. So Horus, there's a lot of, like, this is one of the most ancient gods in Egypt, and was symbolized by the twins constellation, while Osiris was in part seen as the Orion, although again, you can have different depictions during different time periods in Egypt history. So Horus the Falcon sometimes wore a crown with two pillars, as it's shown in this particular image here from Wikimedia, which is part of Wikipedia. And these clearly symbolize the twins constellation. So they're the gates, the pillars, and representing, so, kind of in that time where either represented the solstice point or the one of the equinox points. So, and then Horus the Elder also was married to Hathor, which in part was symbolized by the Bull constellation. So you had those two constellations that were together in the sky, and you can see that And when even at this time, at the time of this recording, these constellations start to rise sometime after 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. They start to begin to come out into the evening sky. But then late fall into winter, you'll be able to see these much, much more and earlier in the evening time. And so Horus the Younger became Horus the Uniter and eventually ruling over all of Egypt. And Horus the Younger was also called the Lord of the Two Lands. So again, there's this duality. There was Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, which had to do with the Nile. And that's the lower was actually the north part of it, because that was the lower elevation where the waters were emptying into the Mediterranean, and the upper was the south part of where the Nile was. Yeah, so I don't have a graphic of Egypt itself, but if we could,
It's interesting to note that the Nile flows from south to north instead of north
yes,
to south, and that's why, that's another reason why, because of the directional flow and because of the elevation is most likely why it flows that way. So,
exactly. In
yeah.
fact, here in Oregon, there's a river, one of the Willamette River, which also flows from south to north and empties into the Columbia River and then into the Pacific Ocean. Anyways, just that there's not too many rivers that do that
Nope.
in the world. So here's another image of the twins, and you can see the constellation. This is from about, looks like here, 300 years ago, when Pollux marked the equinox point. So this was all, a really long time ago. And 6335 BC, that's when the center of Pollux was right there in that mark. And most of the twins was in the sign of Pisces at that time. And then the bull was in the sign of Aquarius. And the crab, of course, was in Aries. So it gives you a really different image here. And in fact, what would it be like with those constellations informing these kinds of signs? So what would the twins inform Pisces, and how would the bull inform Aquarius, and Aries inform the crab? So these would be, generate all kinds of, imagination ideas of how that would play on in humanity. So I think that's really a fascinating exploration, actually. So here's some stars that marked the June solstice and March equinox over periods of time. So again, I'm not going to read off everything, but here is the June solstice in 542 CE, meaning AD, where Castor marked the solstice. So that's how long it's been, about 1500 years since Castor marked the solstice. And so we see that right there in this particular graphic. And
Now moved over to this cross where these
yes,
that
it's now
moved
over there.
all this way, but it took it a long time.
Exactly. It just goes also to, like, when we say there's an age, like we're in the age, moving into the age of the water bearer, and that's equinox based. But what if we include the solstice points and the other equinox point? Then we would get the four corners, and all four would represent the more dynamic version of the age quote we're moving into. And so I do feel about this, that, how the power of duality and how it impacted humanity over the last few thousand years, and the twins representing those gates, and the polarity of night and day, and where in some stories the twins, one was mortal and one was immortal, and one would, they sometimes they wouldn't be able to connect to each other because they were always opposite. And so one twin was good at one thing and one twin was good at another. And so you get this duality represented through, kind of filter into various cultures. But this is just an example of what times when stars represented the solstice and equinox points, and just for your reference there.
Also, it's just fascinating to see how if this is the zero Cancer point, and then and this is the range of Gemini, Gemini when this constellation was named Gemini, meaning twins, but it was literally in the season of Gemini at that time. and that was why they forgot about the movement, they forgot that they weren't the same thing, and they
Mhm.
named the constellation the same name as the signs, and that causes a lot of challenges for us today.
It definitely does. So here's another look at what other cultures looked at, and the Dogon people from West Africa also referenced as the twins, and this, from during the period, and we don't know exactly how far back it goes, some of their beliefs, but they had in their creation story, the twins, male and female, were birthed from the egg in the world, and there's actually in the book when the dragon wore the crown, which talks about the different ages of constellations. He talks about how during when the twins were at the March equinox point, how there was a lot of references to creation stories and the egg giving birth, and in some cases twins coming forth. But so there was this bird reference, and there was a twins reference. So this is part of what during that time. So there can be some speculation around this, and they called it Nomo. The celestial twins of the heaven relate to this constellation, and were seen at March equinox over 6,500 years ago. And then Amma, the Dogon creator god, after a challenging start, so he created twins a few times, and then finally got it right like the third time or something. He created a new pairs, and then he brought them up into the sky, which became the twins that we see today in the June solstice. So this is another reference point, and of how another culture saw the twins.
I just want to say, I have boy girl twins.
Yeah, I was gonna there was another spot I was gonna ask you about that, but we're good.
So
Ian,
I feel a strong connection to this constellation being male, female, whatever connection. And
yeah,
yeah,
I feel it much more profoundly with the male female connection there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty fun.
And it was usually again, the Greek and the Roman times is when they really started to make it more, quote, male dominated, and two brothers. They weren't the only ones that did that, but that was when started to come around. So this is just another twin pillars representing duality, just an easy graphic to look at and see the lines, you know. And those are the reason I pick out those particular stars, because those are the four brightest stars, and you see those first before the other ones come out under dark sky conditions. So Pollux and Castor, and then Alhina and Tejet, representing the feet, and it's like the Roman numeral two, or two pillars.
And it really does look like that in the night sky when you see
Yes,
those four stars in their lineup, and it's like you cannot mistake it. That is what it looks like.
right. So, and then there's myth around the duality and the separation of earth and sky, and you can see a graphic here from Egypt of Nut and being held up. I can't remember those other gods that are in there, but it has to do with like how the sky is separate from the earth and the sun in that space. So ancient tales of the cosmic egg, birthing twins, or breathing air and breath or other forms held humanity's understanding of this relationship with the sky during this time. So in the last 2,000 years, the twins have appeared around the June solstice, and but there has been a much deeper separation, division of the earth and sky, male versus female, and siblings versus siblings, in the last 2 to 3,000 years here, especially those last couple of millennia. And we see the divisiveness continuing in today and in modern times throughout the world. And so that divisiveness, the division continues. But maybe by moving into the June solstice, moving into the bowl, that we get a period where we start to move away from that duality into something that hasn't been seen, or maybe some echoes from an ancient time, but in a modern way. So, some new territory for humanity. So I find that also really fascinating. Again, it's a really slow progress. We're just in the in between realm right now, in the turning of an age.
Yes, indeed. It'll be interesting to see what happens. if if
Yeah.
it lasts that long.
I think there'll be people on this planet,
Probably so.
whoever they are. I
Whoever
think
they are,
they'll be
right?
here. The stars of Castor and Pollux, obviously two of the famous stars. So Castor is technically the alpha star, and then Pollux, which is interesting, but Pollux is brighter in magnitude. I'll share the magnitude as we go forward here. But Castor is 51 light years away, currently at 2033 Cancer, and then Pollux is only 3 degrees away, 3 degrees away from Castor in the sky, but 34 light years away from us. And at Pollux is at 2331 Cancer. So Castor will be the first to appear, but just marginally when the stars are rising in the east. I mean, first to appear when they're rising above the horizon, but like if they're just already risen, then Pollux will be the first one to actually be seen because it's brighter. These stars have a very, very long and potent hold on humanity, even without the rest of the constellation. So if it was just those two stars, they would still be, I think, still have a profound hold on our psyche. So yeah, they symbolize the heads of the twins there. So that's just a slide that is just yeah. So this is where I was going to mention Jenna and Ian.
Oh,
I didn't write it on here, but I wanted to share it verbally. So
right.
this is not a exhaustive list here, but these are a lot of the more well-known ones. And there's some biblical references, obviously the Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri, the Ashwins from ancient India. They even had them as two peacocks and yin and yang, which are two images I've got there. So you can see more duality in that regards. There was also a reference to the pair of kids following Auriga and the goat, which is the constellation where Capella is. Two sprouting plants in ancient Egypt, along with Horus the Younger and Horus the Elder. And Romulus and Remus even was projected on there at one time, and their pile of bricks building Rome. So we have quite a few here. In fact, in Hindu, I think it's Hindu, there's one reference of a woman holding a golden cord. So when I look at that, obviously that's not quote a twins, but that was one of the projected images that at some point was brought forth into that constellation from South Asia.
So here in the 21st century, started in the 20th century, we could add to this list Ian and Jenna, my twins.
We could. So if you want to edit that,
Yes.
you're welcome to.
Okay.
Not just you, Cam, anyone else.
Anybody else, right? Anybody else who wants to add to this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Anyway,
So here's a easy way to find the twins. And there's a line, you can draw a line, roughly straight line from Rigel to Betelgeuse to Castor. Pollux is a little off from that, but once you find Castor, it's easy to find Pollux. And so if you trace that line with your your eyes or your finger, you can easily point that out. Now all those stars right in that area, that's part of the Lakota sacred hoop of stars. We got Rigel as the other side of that border there, and Betelgeuse.
Procyon here too.
Oh yeah, Procyon, and Pleiades is kind of
Up here.
yeah, right up there. Oh yeah, I had to
All is off screen, but yeah.
I had to switch my my window so because of the things were covering it a little bit there. But yeah, they're right here, so that where you can see Pleiades right there on the edge.
Yeah, right here.
So yeah, so this is going to be one of the dominant parts of the sky coming up here, especially as we get into November and December, when it's not cloudy and you get out there and look at that. It's absolutely one of the most powerful regions of the sky to see. And that's all where the galactic edge is, and then the galactic center has its own hold, which is actually you can see right now before sunset for an hour or two. You can see the galactic center, and you can see the scorpion going down. But these are, to kind of get the feel of the sky and to follow it and to learn learn the stories of the stars. This is part of how we go about doing that. Step by step.
It's really great that as we're recording this in the fall and any fall or winter season, you're going to be able to see these stars more easily rising into the evening sky. So it's just perfect timing for everyone to go out and start tuning in.
Absolutely. So Castor. So according to the book that we reference in each class, the Starlight Elixir book by Smokus and Rubenfeld. So this one, they reference Castor. It factors heavily with the logical or left hemisphere brain functions. This can be supported by the minerals and metals of manganese, magnesium, calcium, chromium. And Castor also enhances the interconnectivity with the brain, especially in bringing the logic in with the intuitive part of the brain, where it is not separate but works together. According to Bernadette Brady, Castor was the light and morning star, and Pollux was the dark and evening star. So she writes that the morning star was also known as Lucifer, the light bearer, and the evening star, Pollux, Vespers, the evening star. So Lucifer's expulsion from heaven and into the whirlpool is possibly the mythological retelling of the slipping of Castor into the southern declinations. And so, when the sky changes over thousands of years, and right now that part of the sky where the twins are is when it rises and it gets up, it gets really, really high in the sky, almost overhead, depending on where you are on the earth. Like from where I am, it's pretty high in the sky here at the about 42 degrees north latitude. But when it was at the time of equinox, it was a little bit lower in the sky, or if it was at the time of December solstice, it would be even lower. So there's mythologies around that. And so Castor and Pollux are now, of course, seen in the northern latitudes. So the world, I was sharing the whirlpool reference of what Brady shared, but I think it could be a reference to the cosmic turning of the sky. So like, because it's been looked at as a mill or some kind of great cosmic ocean or whirlpool, and you get the stars kind of spinning around and over long periods of time. And so this is what she could be referencing here, along with the other things about Castor and Pollux there. So there's of course, part of the story of Jason the Argonauts, which we talked a lot about in the last class. Castor and Pollux were part of that journey with Jason, and Castor was considered the elite horseman, and Pollux was the one who was, quote, the boxer, and he took part in the boxing contest and defeated King Amycus, and he was a savage of the savage mythical people of Bithynia. And then after returning from the voyage, the twins, the Dioscuri, helped Jason and Pallas destroy the city of Iolcus in revenge for the treachery of its king Peleus. That's quite a revenge. It's pretty destructive, actually. And the twins also appear in the Iliad and the Odyssey as well. So they also helped, of course, them find the Golden Fleece in the journey. So here's Pollux in astrology, 2331 Cancer. You can see the light of Castor and Pollux are actually different colors. Castor is more of a bluish star, and Pollux is more of a reddish orange star. And Pollux is a little bit closer to our solar system as well. So Pollux figures heavily with the intuitive and right hemisphere brain functions, and also enhances the process of absorbing more of what can help us in pre-thoughts prior to the electrical impulses of mind chatter. So it relates to more of the true awareness without the temporal constraints, meaning like the stillness before actual thoughts might come in. It's the mind is there, but it has these different layers, and it has and Pollux has a much greater connection to that intuitive part of ourselves. But again, together they represent that interconnectivity where they're working together. So more purposeful creativity and new ideas and bringing them into form can be assisted by this star's energy. And Brady considers it that Castor was the light of the morning star and Pollux was the dark of the evening star. And Pollux tends to bring a greater awareness of the quote, the shadowy side of things and more into the deeper feelings of that can throw us off emotionally. And there seems to be more of a kind of a Saturn and Pluto feel to this star when compared to Castor and its Jupiterian Mercury feel. That's what kind of comes out there. But again, it's not a copy of Saturn and Pluto. There's just different like layers there that kind of fed into those particular stars. So both Castor and Pollux complete the story within the duality to help us grow beyond the duality, especially as it relates to the entirety of the constellation and humanity's evolvement. There's another star, Alhina. This is at plus 1.9. It's almost the same brightness as Castor, actually. They're both roughly like 1.7 to 1.9, and Pollux is about 1.2 or 1.3 magnitude. Alhina, though, is farther away at 109 light years, and the second brightest star in this constellation. So just a little bit brighter. Actually, yeah, a little bit brighter than Castor is. So it currently symbolizes one of the feet of Pollux, and with Tejat and Propus marking the other foot of Castor. So at one time in Persia, the star, along with other stars that represent the feet of the twins, were Al-Nuhati, Hate, and they had a camel image up there and the camel's hump. But in Babylonia, to mark the, according to this, I know you're going to get into the nakshatras later, but it marked the 10th ecliptic constellation, part of their lunar zodiac, which was the twins of the shepherd, and little twins, and other stars at the feet of the twins that are all inside. Like the twins kind of straddle that area of the edge of the Milky Way galaxy, which we're in. So, and then this was again part of the actually no, this is okay. So this was a portion of what was known as a canal in the sky as well. So the Milky Way and the twins, the Milky Way had a lot of mythologies around it, and watery, we even call it the Milky Way. So it's got this liquidy kind of feel to it.
The
So
River
there
of
was
Stars. It's also called the River of
the
Stars.
river, exactly. The river, that was the other one I was looking for in my brain.
Yeah.
But it also represented a canal. And so this is, again, when we're looking at this, all these stories were generated from our relationship to the sky. And so there's a lot of us that had in Western culture disconnected from those stories in that sky, but we're still, you might say, still have a relationship, even though it's not entirely, in a lot of cases, not entirely conscious, but it's there. We're part of it. And so this is some of the stories that are coming out, some of the magic that's happening here. And then Propus and Tejat, they're fainter stars, but under dark skies, you can really make them out. And Propus in particular is right there at just 3.5 degrees away from the June solstice point there at 3:45 Cancer. And then Tejat's only a couple degrees away at 5:37 Cancer. So there is some research that these stars were sometimes part of the Orion constellation, representing a weapon the Orion or the hunter or the high man carried. And in ancient China, Propus was known as Yu, a battle axe. So there's some reference there to the hunter in that, as part of the weapon. And then this is really interesting. So I'm not sure when looking at the constellation how we look at this, but at one time Propus was seen as the front of the mouth of the twins and Tejat the back of the mouth. So instead of maybe the bodies of the twins, maybe they were just the constellation was just the head. So that's a possibility that was represented there. And then Propus marked the June solstice in 1753, and in Tejat in the year 1620. So here's another reference to the, as we go through the constellations, we'll show where the planets were in particular constellations, and in this case, the twins. Pluto was last in the twins roughly around 1913 to 1938, and it won't be there again for another 135 years. Neptune will be in there again in 2065, Uranus in 2032, Chiron in 2038. And then Saturn will go there again in 10 years in 2032. It was last there in 2003 to 05, and then Jupiter in just in a few years it'll move through the twins in 2025 and 2026. Ceres is there every 4+ years. It's there this year, but in 2026 and 2027 it actually spends a lot of time in the twins as it retrogrades through that constellation. And then Eris won't be there again until almost, was that 170 years from now. It moves into there. And then Vesta will go there every 3.5 years. And so the dates that I show with the sun going in there roughly are, I think, Kaylin, you had maybe a day or two difference from what I've got there.
Yeah, and again, you know,
Yeah,
like-
it's again, it depends on the boundaries. You can use 0 Cancer, which is kind of what I use there, June 21st. You could say June 20th if you want, depending on the year. And then July 18th, you can use July 19th or 20, but it's in that zone of the early part of the northern summer and the southern winter.
Beautiful.
So artifacts honoring the Dioscuri, I've got some of them listed here. There were temples. The famous one is in Rome. That's the one at the top there with the 3 pillars. It's interesting. It's not 2, but 3. And it's been 3 for like apparently over 1,000 years, I think, that it stood. And there's Roman coins that were part of the twins. And then there's statues and temples in Athens and Naples and Argos, Egypt, and Sicily. So they were found all over that part of the world. Wait, we'll go back. I want to share something else on that. Thank you. The first known Dioscuri temple was in 495 BC after a major battle was won by the Roman Republic. And this is really interesting. So the legend has it that the Dioscuri were on the battlefield helping the Romans, and they were typically seen as riding white horses. So this is just interesting that they appeared at a particular battle to help Rome, fight off its enemy and build, quote, the Republic going forth. And so just a little piece of trivia there, in case you were wondering more about its history there. That was all. So here's a personal stars example. We can see where at 9:45 a.m. my ascendant is in Capricorn, but my descendant is in Cancer. So I can choose, in this case, which star if I want. I can use Castor. I can use Wasat. They're only about a degree apart. And I've got another slide to show you my chart and where it is. But that's where on the chart where Wasat would be when I was born, and then where Castor was at that time. So mine is at 1423 Cancer, so about 5 degrees away from Castor and about 4 degrees away from Wasat. So I could use that so I could see that. That was roughly opposite the star Nunki, which is in the sign of Capricorn in the Archer constellation. And I will just share, I didn't create a slide for this, but my south node at 7 degrees Leo is roughly in the beehive stars in the Crab constellation, which Kaylin is going to talk about here in just a few moments. So I've always been fascinated by the beehive for many years because it's so difficult to see, but you have to be under really, really dark skies to see it. And so it's like one of those mysteries, if you will. And so I love that my south node's connected to that.
It's so cool because I don't have any connections. And also, just so people are aware, of course, anything that's over on near the descendant, these were getting ready to set. So the twins were setting, and the crab was getting ready to set around the time that you were born.
Yep.
If people could go out into the night sky, they would have seen that. But since it was the daytime, they probably didn't see it.
Yep.
So,
Ah, the Geminids.
yeah. I just put this
Took
in
a
because
minute
it
to
is,
do that, and you got it in there. Thank you. I
yeah,
forgot.
one of the best meteor showers of the year from November 19th to December 24, peaking around December 14th. And literally, if there's no moon in the sky, you can see up to 120 meteors per hour. So it's amazing. And one definitely worth checking out. And I've been out under the sky in Arizona, in Tucson. It's not so cold, and you can definitely go out and check it out if you have clear skies. So, highly recommended. So now we're going to just look at the lunar mansions from the Vedic perspective, and Eric was sharing earlier about the Babylonian perspective, and just to kind of get an idea of how these nakshatras work. There's a 360-degree zodiacal band, so it's 360 degrees of where anything can show up on that band, and each nakshatra there's 27 of them, so they're covering about 13.3 degrees of the sky. 13 times 27 equals 351. So if you add that 0.3, then you get the rest of it in there. Yeah, it helps to get the rest of it in there. So if we considered 28 nakshatras or lunar mansions, then they would cover about 13 degrees each. So 27, you have to add a little bit, and zero point 0.3 might not even be really quite enough. And so I don't know how they probably didn't, I don't know if they were using math or just like looking at the sky and figuring out where those nakshatras were. But
Hmm.
anyway, but this is the reason why we have three nakshatras and overlapping in different constellations. And you kind of see this, here's the twins constellation, here's the crab constellation, and here are the different nakshatras that are overlapping these these constellations. So that's just so you kind of get a sense of that for those who might not really fully comprehended that yet. I'm still comprehending it myself, so I totally get it. Anyway, so you want to do the twins, Eric?
Oh yeah. Okay. So number 5, unpronounceable. Rika
Rika
Shira.
Shira.
31 Gemini to 50 Cancer. This is at the Bull and Galactic Cross, near the Galactic Edge, entering the Twins. It's a star of searching, the power to find fulfillment, wandering, exploring, and seeking truth and gently. You can see like the image of the Megashira, Shirsha. Okay, well, there's a different name there than,
Right.
but you can see it's a combination of the bull and the twins. And that's how you know where kind of that's very like more clear than some maybe the other ones are, but that you know where exactly where that would be in that sort of that between realm between the bull and the twins there. And the next one is number 6, Ardra, 051 Cancer to 1410 Cancer. Again, at the Galactic Cross, which is again the June solstice point. This is the twins teardrop, star of emotion, power to feel and act, stormy and passionate drive for expression, understanding. And then number 7 is the Punarvasu, 1411 Cancer and 2730 Cancer. The twins and also lines with Sirius. So these are the arrows, the star of renewal, the power to regenerate and recover life itself, enlightening the world, and hope, and then calling the new dawn. So you can see another Gemini symbol in that as well. So when you're looking at this, and maybe if you have, as we're going through these nakshatras throughout the classes, as we've shared before, you can look at your own to see what what planets you and points you may have in that, and see your own nakshatras. Uh, and in this case, they're here, the ones that are around the twins constellations, with also part of the bowl.
Yes, beautiful. And so just a reminder that these are the nakshatras that cover these constellations, but the signs and the degrees that are given are the seasonal signs, not what the Vedic people would refer to as the um, the constellation. So just to
Right.
keep that in mind. So if you want to look at your chart and your planets with something around these degrees, then you know that you have planets that were in that constellation as well. Kind of a cool thing to do. So of course the crab also contains part of Punarvasu, uh, and depending on where you start the crab, is it right after that leaves Castor and Pollux and around 27 degrees? So anyway, this covers the twins and the crab. And then Pushya is 27 Cancer to 10 Leo, and that covers the beehive cluster that we're going to talk about quite a bit. And it's the cow udder, it's the star of nourishment, the power to create spiritual energy. And then number 9, Ashleisha, from 10 Leo 51 to 24 Leo 10, the crab and the lion. Um, and it just depends on where you decide to cut off the crab. And I think that nowadays it's actually a little bit more towards just being in the crab. But anyway, it's the snake, it's the clinging star, the powers of poison and medicine, hypnotizing the mind while transforming and healing afflictions. So pretty cool. You guys can look at that a little bit more.
Okay, Caitlin, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah,
Thank you. So that symbol there, it's like a combination of like snakes or
like a
part of Mercury.
caduceus. Yeah,
Yeah,
caduceus
yeah,
and Mercury. Yep.
and then it has power of poison and medicine. So anyway, just really
Yeah,
powerful there.
yeah. It definitely looks like the caduceus. So,
Mhm.
without the middle rod staff kind of thing, but yeah.
Right.
And then that could be like definitely like Mercury or the horns of the bull too. So
Yeah, that's true.
interesting. Anyway, so December evenings around 10 p.m., you'll see the crabs coming up over the horizon, the twins. You can still, the sacred hoop is like fully in the sky, and here's Sirius, Procyon. Of course, we don't see the top of the hoop in this image, but that's just so you can kind of get a sense of like what to look for, and as we get more into winter. And then inspired by Eric, the crab is overlaid, the whole entire crab is overlaid by the seasonal sign of Leo. And Leo is partly in the head of the line. We'll talk about this more in the next class. And because Regulus is at 0 Virgo. So that has been making it shift. And then, of course, we've got the Gemini Cancer at the feet of the twins, and how Cancer really overlays the entire constellation. So when we think about the twins, it's Cancer season. If we think about the crab, it's the Leo season. And we think about the lion, it's the Virgo season. And then of course the Castor and Pollux and Procyon are as we've talked about, the outer edge of the sacred hoop of stars. So we're kind of leaving the sacred hoop now and moving towards a different constellation, the crab. And so this is where you see in March evenings around 7 p.m. And this is what you see in May evenings around 8 p.m. And these are setting. They're going down towards the west. Well, in March it's not setting yet, but in May they're getting ready to set. So you see the crab and the twins, and the bull's already set, and the lion's headed down as well, just so you can kind of get a sense of that. And then it was interesting to kind of go back and look. So I took this back to 2500 BCE, and this is where the sun was at the summer solstice in the crab, 2500 BCE. So what we know is that the first written record of this constellation was cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in his Almagest in the 2nd century BCE of our current era, and that the name the crab Cancer is the Latin for crab, and that's why it was named that, because there was the summer solstice, the zero Cancer point in the crab at the time that they were coming up with the names of this. And it's considered one of the faintest of the 12 zodiacal constellations along the ecliptic. And when we looked at the sea goat, we talked about it being one of the fainter ones, but the crab is even fainter than the sea goat. So it might be the faintest one. I guess it just depends because the ram is pretty faint too. So there,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's like three of them that are somewhat faint. Anyway, so the sun was rising with the crab at the summer solstice, zero Cancer point, around 2,700 years ago. The beehive cluster, I mean, the beehive cluster was rising with the beehive cluster around 2,700 years ago. The beehive is now around 7 Leo, 731, I think, something like that. And so the other thing to keep in mind is for any of these constellations, the seasonal points or any point will be in that constellation for 2,160 years approximately. And it all some of that depends on how they divide all that up and just determine where a constellation begins and ends. So one of the things we can know is that the beehive, and we're going to talk about the beehive a lot in a little bit. The sun has been in the seasonal sign of Leo with the beehive for the last 505 years. And again, with the beehive around 7 degrees, it moves 1 degree every 72 years. It's around 7.5 degrees of Leo. So that's how we can get a sense of how this movement is taking place. And of course, then the beehive and the crab, well, a lot of the crab, will be in the for another probably 1,655 years that it'll be with Leo. So you can see that it takes a while for the seasonal signs to really move through an entire constellation. And so I think, and this is one of the reasons why these things can be forgotten over time, like how these seasonal signs are moving through the constellations. So the crab has the mythic story of Hercules, the Hydra, and the crab connected to it. And this is a fascinating story because it has to, and Hercules was given, in some versions of the story, he was given 10 labors, but he had help with this particular one, and so they added another labor, and then for some reason he was supposedly had failed at one, and so they added another labor. So now that's called the 12 labors of Hercules. But he originally had 10, according to what I found in my research. So there was this place in Lerna where there was a hydra that had 9 heads. One head was considered to be immortal, and then the rest of the heads, if you cut one of them off, 2 would grow in its place. So what happened was when Hercules went, his nephew went with him, Iolaus, and so when Hercules was cutting off one of the heads and 2 would grow back in its place, well, Iolaus figured out how to cauterize the heads so that 2 new heads couldn't grow back. So they were finally able to defeat this hydra, and one of the heads was considered immortal, couldn't be killed. So they had to like roll it up in something and bury it deep in the earth and put a bunch of stuff on top of it to keep it from coming back. Anyway, Juno, or Hera, was enemies with Hercules, so she sends the crab to help defeat Hercules. And here you can see Hercules is using his um, um, ah,
Club.
club. Thank you. His club to beat the Hydra, and then the crab is here like pinching his feet. Anyway, so the whole point was the crab was supposed to throw Hercules off balance so that the Hydra would defeat Hercules instead of the other way around. And so, but Hercules just smashes the crab, and so Juno, or Hera, decides to put this crab in the sky in honor of the crab's service. Now, what's interesting, and we think about this, is we have a lot of mythic tales where the so-called gods and goddesses placed creatures or people in the sky as a way to honor them. And that, then becomes the mythic story that is associated with that particular constellation. So, what are the stories we're going to have now? That's what I want to know.
And
And
it's, yeah, and in the sky, Hydra is not far from the crab, right?
yeah, it's very close. In fact, here's the head of Hydra with the
Yep,
crab, and we'll see
there it
some
is.
more images of that coming up soon. Well, yeah.
There we go.
Oh, here's the Hydra. Yeah, this is when the crab is getting ready to set. But the sun in the crab right now, um, it's in July and August, and then on July 30th, it's exact with the beehive. Um, so I don't know why I put that slide there. I don't think I meant to put that there. Anyway, but the other thing about the crab is that it was also seen as a crayfish. It was seen as a beetle or a scarab, and we're going to look at the scarab mythology here in a moment. And on the old manuscripts, on the cathedral doors, on the stained glass windows, they often show the crab as I just mentioned, either a crayfish or a beetle or a scarab. And so here's just some images of that you can kind of see and tune into. Now, the scarab, but was from the ancient Egyptian perspective. And so they didn't see this constellation as a crab, they saw it as a scarab. And they also associated it with the god Khepri and as the rising sun and the bringer of life because of the way that scarabs um, work. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that was really fascinating is that as they've been doing lots of excavations in Egypt, they've been finding these little scarab amulets everywhere, thousands of them in archaeological sites around Egypt. So the reason is because of how powerful they felt the scarab was. So here's the god Khepri, and this is the like a scarab face on this god. Like, oh my God, that's kind of scary. But anyway, so the scarab is known, it's a beetle, and it's known for rolling its dung in the dust and pushing the dung for long distances and making pellets where the females then lay their eggs. And this related to the Egyptian concept that a celestial scarab symbolically pushed the sun across the heavens each day. And so Khepri was seen as a god who came into being himself. He wasn't birthed, he wasn't brought into this world. So he represented the scarab because he was birthing himself anew all the time. And so the ancient Egyptians believed that the scarab were only male. They didn't think that there were female scarabs, and that so that they could reproduce themselves, and they would deposit their semen into the dung ball. Now that's been we could say that's really definitely probably a patriarchal point of view that has been disproven because they do know that the females lay their eggs in the dung ball, and then the baby scarabs come from that. But this idea of the self-creation of the beetle resembles that of Khepri, who creates himself out of nothing. This idea that he was a self-created god and he was strongly connected to the sun, and he was pushing the sun across the sky each day, and then it would go into the underworld, and then so it was like that dying and be reborn on a daily basis idea. So the scarab, and here you can see the scarab with the sun. The sun's often above the scarab, and we'll see that again in a moment. And then sometimes they have the uraeus or the snake coming outside of the sun. So this is the reason that they were so interested in this imagery was because for them it symbolized good fortune and hope and restoration and renewal and regeneration and resurrection and rebirth. and metamorphosis and immortality and protection. And so they felt that there were magical rejuvenating properties that could benefit both the living and the dead. So, of course, the scarabs were often placed on the dead bodies when they were, especially when the wealthy people were entombed. I don't know about, probably not the poor people. But anyway, the other thing was that when they were living, they would put inscriptions on the bottom of the scarab amulet. And that was often their name in hieroglyphs and along with other symbols and geometric patterning that they were using. And they could press that into clay like a signature. And so that was maybe one of the ways that they would, they would sign something in the way back in those days. So if we think about this being connected to the sun god, and the rising and the setting and dying each day and being reborn, then we can understand why the scarab pushing its dung ball and moving it long distances and then from the dung ball new beetles being born, new scarabs being born. So that was why they were seen as such a good luck symbol. And oh, by the way, I have a little scarab here. You probably can't see it, but I'm wearing it in honor of the fact that we're looking at the scarab mysteries that I got in Egypt in 1999. And it is a golden scarab with hieroglyphs on the bottom of it, just like we're seeing here. So pretty cool. So in this book, The Lost Light: An Interpretation of Ancient Scriptures, it talks about how the ancient Egyptian texts describe the beetle or the scarab living 6 months underground and 6 months above ground, kind of like the day being above the ground and the night being below the ground, sort of relates to that idea, and also relates to Proserpina, who is the Roman core, and figuratively relates to the human soul as well. So the 6 lower signs typify incarnate life, but the beetle has further instructions for us. He observes that the beetle deposits its ball of eggs rolled in dung in the earth for the space of 28 days, a lunar cycle, as the moon is passing through the 12 zodiacal signs. And it's really 27.3 days for the moon to pass through all the signs and come back to a starting point. But, a lot of times they just round it up to 28. But on the 29th day, the day of the resurrection, according to lunar markings, there occurs the baptism of the beetle. And the scarabaeus then casts the ball into the water, and then it opens to give birth to the young beetles. And you notice it says his ball into the water. So it's still that idea that it's a male beetle that's recreating itself, that there are no female beetles or scarabs. So this immersion in baptism leads to a renewal and regeneration. So Ptah or Khepri or the lunar god has always declared to be self-created, never born. So this is something that comes from the ancient texts. Now, something else that I found fascinating was that the crab constellation also has associations with the idea or the concept of crabs in a barrel or crabs in a bucket. And I was like, really? Wow, that is so amazing. So when you put crabs in a barrel, they will prevent any other crabs from escaping. They keep pulling the crabs that's trying to get out back down. So I love this imagery here. You see this crab trying to get out and these other crabs are trying to pull it back down. Oh, no, you don't. Where do you think you're going? Come back down here where you belong with the rest of us. Like, we don't want you getting out of here. We want you here with us. And so this idea of this mentality, if you put one crab in a bucket, it can claw its way out. If there are more than one in a bucket, crabs will gang up and hold the other crabs down inside the bucket, trapping one another. So then the whole idea is we don't want to feel insecure when you see other people improve. It's not that you're failing, it's that other people are succeeding because, you're not failing because they're succeeding. No two people are made to be contained within the same bucket. So, and here's this idea, if I can't have it, neither can you. So I'm pulling you back down with me. So, this really seems to describe how some people who envy another's success will go out of their way to do things to hold the other person back and drag them down. This is often unconscious. And, so the expression is generally applied to those who are from the same class or race and they don't like to see others of their kind achieve more than they have. And I feel like, oh my gosh, this is something for us to be really tuned into and conscious of around how Leo is now overlaying the constellation of the crab. And I love this, I love these lions looking at this little crab here. And that because most of the crab, all of the crab is overlaid by this, the seasonal sign of Leo now. So this is the question we might ask. How is the crab informing the seasonal sign of Leo? And if we think about the crab carrying its home on its back, somewhat like the turtle does, and that it has strong links to the mother goddess, then we could imagine that the crab is reminding Leo of the importance of genuine, nurturing, wholehearted self love while co creating ways for others to feel safe in showing up and being who they truly are. Because that would say is the healthy expression of Leo and of Cancer or the crab or this energy of the Divine Mother, the Mother Goddess. So I thought of another way to say that, and just to say when healthy, the crab and Leo energies work together to create an environment where it is safe to show up and shine in ways that are supported, accepted, and valued without the worry of getting in trouble with those who feel threatened and are acting out of jealousy and insecurity. So, so that's I feel like the opportunity we have, and we can energize this whenever planets are moving through the sign of Leo and through this constellation, and we'll see when that's going to be happening a little later. So the Chaldeans and the Platonists felt that the crab constellation represented the gate of men, and we talked about this when we talked about the sea goat, that they also saw that that constellation, the sea goat or goatfish, was the gate of the gods. And it kind of fits into something that Eric was speaking to a little earlier, the silver gate, the coming through the gates of duality with the twins. And it's interesting that the crab and the twins are right next to each other. So perhaps the journey is through the crab, through the gates and into this reality, down the river of stars through the Milky Way. We could imagine that that might be how souls enter this reality. So what we're seeing here is that there's the beehive cluster we're going to talk about more in a moment, but there are these two stars, Acilus Borealis and Acilus Australis, that are on either side of the beehive cluster. And they were considered to be asses or donkeys, is another way you could say that. And that the beehive cluster is the manger, so that the donkeys are stationed on either side of the manger. And this may be connected to the whole story of the Christ child and the nativity, and how in a lot of the art, there are donkeys on either side behind the manger, like kind of guarding, protecting what's going on there in that way. So the baby born in a manger seems to also relate to the idea of this as the gate of men, like coming into physical reality, coming into human form, the gate of human, or the gate of, of as we look at from the twins' perspective, coming into the gate of duality, coming into this reality, kind of thing. Any thoughts about that, Eric?
Gate of humanity, gate of duality. I mean, we're humans now, or we're living in this major duality. So yeah, I mean that makes sense. I just like following it. It makes perfect sense. Obviously, in that picture there, they show the sheep and
Oh yeah, and
which is the ram, and then they got the bull between the two donkeys, and then the angels, which could represent perhaps the twins in that way. So I mean, you got some of the constellations featured there just in that image there.
yeah, the lamb, the Lamb of God, Aries, the ram, that kind of thing. Idea that
Mm-hmm.
Christ was the Lamb of God. Yeah,
The shepherd's connected to that. Yeah,
right.
it's
And as you were saying, it's so fascinating to see how a lot of the Christian stories are related to the sky, to the constellations, to what's going on there, even though in probably more recent times, the Christian perspective, a lot of people will say, oh, astrology. Uh,
Exactly.
it has no meaning, whatever. But anyway, we can see that that isn't what they always thought. So, at the heart of this constellation is the Beehive Cluster, also known as M44, also known as Praesepe, meaning manger or crib, and or hive. So it kind of covers all of that. And it is the largest open cluster in the sky. And of course is located around 7 degrees of Leo. It's one of the first objects that Galileo studied with his telescope. It's big. It covers a big part of the sky. There's at least 40 visible stars that are seen as like a cloudy patch by the naked eye. You have to be under very dark skies to be able to see it. It's not easy to see with all the light pollution we have these days. Um, but the best time to actually kind of figure out where this constellation is when a planet is going by or the a tiny crescent moon, because the the moon, if it's a bright moon, a big moon, a half court, a half moon or whatever, it will just blot out this cluster. um, and it was also considered that if you couldn't see the beehive because it was kind of cloudy, or it wasn't as clear, that it was predicting stormy weather. Ancient people, many ancient cultures felt that way. So here's the best way to find the beehive. You got the twins and Castor and Pollux up here, and you've got the lion and Regulus here, and it's kind of halfway between. You can see it here too. And Praesepe, they named it Praesepe here. But Regulus, it's about halfway between these, like say Pollux and Regulus. And it covers 1.5 degrees across the sky, that spreading its light over an area bigger than 3 full moons. But it's dim, so unfortunately, if there's a full moon there, you probably won't see it. And also, it's easier to find with binoculars as a result of that. And so let's see. Yeah. So the beehive. So beehive connects us into bee medicine. And so I feel like when planets or the moon are there, it's a great time to just be more connected. Be, huh, be more connected. Bees, they're small, but they have mighty medicine. So,
They do.
yes. um, and they have a strong connection to the cycles of the sun. So when flowers open up, the bees are gathering pollen. And when the flowers close up, they go back to the hive. They're like totally connected into the natural cycles and rhythms, and also of the seasons, of course, because there's certain times of the year the bees are going to be kind of hibernating out, hanging out in the hive, not going out because it's winter. They work in community, they work together, they produce honey, and they create a literal experience of the sweetness of life. Honey is, like the strongest symbol we could have of the sweetness of life. In fact, I've been involved in many priestess ceremonies where honey was used to represent the sweetness of life. So these bees also have the ability to accomplish the impossible or seemingly impossible. And that means that we can really accomplish anything we put our energy and passion towards when we're working with bee medicine. And, without bees, oh, here's the tiny crescent moon above the beehive cluster or within the beehive cluster. So I just thought that picture was like a great image of and that's a waning moon as well. So if you can catch a time when the moon is in that phase, in that part of the sky, and it's night, then it'll be easier to figure out where that constellation is, especially if you're under a dark sky. So bees matter and are essential to the whole and are vital to the health and well-being of our planet, pollinating flowers and crops so they can reproduce. Without bees, we're pretty much screwed. We need to be definitely taking care of our bees. And bees teach us about enjoying the blessings of nectar and the sweetness of life. So a good question to consider, especially when planets are in this area of the sky and the moon passes once each month, you know, the Venus and Mercury once each year, the Sun, of course, once each year on July 30th. You can ask these questions. You can ask these questions. Are you enjoying the sweetness of life? And if not, what could you do to change that? Something to tune into when we're connecting in with this, you know, planets coming through this part of the sky and connecting with this cluster. So here, you know, if you want to know, and we'll talk about some of the other of these other stars a little bit too, but this shows you where they were in 2000 and where they are, the ones that I could look up, where they are now, and they haven't moved that much. They move less than a degree, less than a minute a year. It's about 72 years for 1 degree, and there's 60 minutes in a degree. So it's going to be less than a degree every year that they're moving. So they're not moving that fast. So here's the dates you can tune into of when the planets are going into these different signs. And since we're getting short on time, I'm just going to let you be able to go back and look at this when you get this. Also, what Starlight Elixirs has to say about each of these stars. And I think I'll just let you all check that out too. And then there's a very minor meteor shower that happens in the Crab, and from December 14th to February 14th, it's 2 months, interestingly, but it's most prominent and visible from January 1st to January 24th, peaking on January 17th. So knowing this, you can go out and see if you can see that part of the sky and see any meteors. There are not very many. There's like 4 an hour, unlike the Geminids that have 120 an hour, or can have as much as that. And then this is the stones that connect to this constellation. If you feel like you have a strong personal connection and want to work with this more, you can look at these. And then the flower, the sunflower, as another thing that you can work with to help enhance your connection to this constellation. So that brings us to the end. And then our next class will be exploring the Lion and the Priestess. So, phew, we have just a little bit of time here to do some questions. If anybody has questions, we'd love to hear from you, or insights, or ahas, or wow, what's going on? So,
You know, Caitlin, I was just thinking that for our Q&A, maybe after our the class 6, we can do like some kind of an exercise to help people get connected to the stars of the zodiacal constellations by seeing where maybe some of their personal planets or points are connected to some of these stars and where they are, so that they can get more familiar with that.
yeah,
It might be a good tool for them, for
yeah,
everyone to do.
yes, love that. Hi, Adrian. Are you going to ask or say something? No? Okay.
Oh, just great class. Thank you. And very appropriate quote to start off with, because I'm feeling like I'm just like in a wash of this and trying to grasp it. And it's like, no, just,
Yeah, feel it.
ride with it, feel it.
Beautiful. Thank you. I felt like that quote needed to come out.
It was perfect.
Good, 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 good. Anybody else have anything they want to share with us before we go? All right, well, I guess we will see you all. We did change the date for the next class, so be sure to check that out. And crazy, my life has been in an interesting, uh, I'm in a Uranus cycle, so things don't go as expected. So I plan things and then they get changed and rescheduled. So that's why we had to reschedule that class. It's just that, yeah, just so you know. Anyway, all right. I guess we're complete.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all, and appreciate your feedback from Rebecca and Jennifer and Adrian. So we're going to have our next one in early November. And we'll be sending out notice about that, but you can check the class page about the date. And yeah, there'll be the Lion and the Priestess, which are, they are even, if we could take two really profound constellations. We're going to be really diving into that, and
They could
uh,
probably each be their own class. So
they could.
we might even say that one might be closer to a 2-hour class, just because there's going to be so much content to cover.
Yeah, and again, for those, I mean, especially if they're watching recording, just take it in. They're going to be available. They're not going away, and you don't have to memorize it all right off the top of the bat.
Plus,
can-
you've got all our notes.
You've got all our notes,
Slides,
you've got
you've
the
got all our
slides,
notes.
and you can keep referring to them and explore the sky on your own. As well, encourage you all to do that, and more to come.
Yes, very exciting. All right, bye everybody.
All right, take care.